Everybody, welcome back to ELNET's Monday briefing. I'm Mark Sachs, Regional Director at ELNET US. I'm sure all of you have read the headlines over the last couple of weeks. You're an educated bunch and certainly a knowledgeable one. So I'm not going to take the time to go through a litany of headlines right now, but what I'd like to do is bring some perspective to what we as a pro-Israel political community writ large are having to contend with. As many of you know, or hopefully all of you know, ELNET works to broaden and deepen defense and security, diplomatic and economic cooperation between European countries and Israel. But we are stuck right now between a rock and a very hard place. On the one hand, we have a growing chorus of protesters who are creating a growing swell of pressure all across the Western world. None of them care very much about the facts or possess the intellectual honesty to approach this conflict with any nuance. They are suffering from what I'll call Israel derangement syndrome. It looks like a cultural Frankenstein, an ugly amalgamation of cultures and ideologies and peoples that, but for Israel, could never have been created in a normal world. And on the other hand, the on-the-ground circumstances are dire. They're confusing and they're often very foggy, which is something we often find in war. It's hard to know what's true, as we discussed last week with Jackie Alexander from Honest Reporting. And we often have to rely on our faith that Israelis and Israel are doing what's right. But in a world of viral images and compelling narratives, a faithful argument is not often enough. Israel's strategy is not known even to those who are crafting it, as we've seen in recent reports from Israeli press. And Israeli society is being pulled apart physically, emotionally, politically, and psychologically. And today's conversation is about the traumatic toll all of these are taking on the state of Israel and the people who comprise it. And while we are far from experiencing that trauma, all of us are feeling the stress of the responsibilities we bear to serve as emissaries of truth, of facts, and of nuance on Israel's behalf and by extension on Jews around the world's behalf. They're European leaders who want to stand by Israel. It's our responsibility to empower them, and we are. As you know, ELNET has 6 offices in Europe, only 6, and approximately 20 or so employees working in nearly 40 countries. We are on the front lines of the most consequential messaging campaign in modern Jewish and Israel history. And we are doing it with a fraction of what is really needed to be successful. The war may end soon. Doubtful, but it's possible. But our work is only going to get more challenging in its aftermath, and we need your help. We need your financial support, and we need your friends and families' financial support. Talk about our work and help us spread ELNET. We must expand our work and our services significantly, and I'm asking you to be a part of that. We are in the second half of 2025, and many of you have philanthropic dollars still available for investment. So I'm going to make this really easy for you. Click this QR code, which will take you to our website where you can make an investment in ELNET. So I'm asking you, do so. Invest in ELNET and invest in Europe's support of Israel. We can't do this apart. We must do this together. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Marta Kubica, to introduce today's speaker and engage in today's conversation. Thank you, Marta.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Warsaw. I happen to have the most interest. I feel myself that I happen to host the most interesting guests and the most difficult topics. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but I'm very glad that we're joined today by Professor Mooli Lahad, who's an Israeli psychologist and a global authority in psychotrauma and expressive therapy. He's a professor of psychology and drama therapy and the founder and president of the Community Stress Prevention Center in Kiryat Shmona. He's an author of over 35 books, and he developed pioneering models such as the basic PH coping framework and the CFAR CBT trauma treatment protocol, both used worldwide. I had a pleasure to meet Mooli Lahad when he came to Poland for a year-long program that we did together with the Community Stress Prevention Center in ELNET. Um, that was a year-long train the trainer program for mental health professionals and community leaders from Poland and Ukraine addressing the challenges of the Ukrainian refugee crisis after full-scale invasion of Russia in 2022. But today we're going to talk about the trauma in Israel that's greater probably than at any other moment in the history of modern state of Israel. Um, Muli, you recently gave an interview to Haaretz, and that was one of the reasons I really wanted to host you here and to introduce you to our audience. And you said that in your 50 years of psychotrauma work, having helped people coping with disasters around the world, you've said that you have never encountered anything like what the Israeli hostage families are experiencing. Can you elaborate a little bit more what makes this psychological trauma of these families so unprecedented and how it's different than any other crisis or traumas you have dealt with in the past?
I should be very careful to say that I didn't see that for Israel for sure. I know that there are families around the world that their loved ones have been kidnapped uh, and maybe even disappeared, so I can't speak about them. I will try to speak about the situation here because at least in the Israeli, I would say, general attitude is that you are doing everything that you can to release hostages and to help them to go back home for whatever price. And I'm just reminding you that we gave 1,000 and more terrorists back for Gilad Shalit. So there is a kind of expectations for this extra mile that the Israeli government should do. But what we have seen over time, and this part of it is, I would say, normal reaction of the public, which we call desensitization. You can't actually expect everyone to be involved and care and be part of the continuous support for these families, because after so many days and nights, I mean, it's a year and 10 months, people get used to the impossible. There is a blessing in that because, this means that even if you're in hardship, and I will talk later about the hostages themselves, even if you're in the worst condition, this human ability to get used to the impossible is part of our ability to survive. At the same time, I would say the negative effect of it is that you become desensitized to people's suffering, and thus you give the families a sense that they are alone. I should say that in general, the Israeli public is very supportive of the family, in vast majority. When you ask me what I wrote in Haaretz, is what I learned, because there is no, I would say, knowledge of how you deal with such a prolonged hostage case and their immediate families. And I want to say one more thing. So when you're talking about the immediate families, it's not just the mothers, fathers, and brothers. It is also next of kin that have left everything just to support. So it's a quite big circle. And what we've learned, what I've used in order to understand for me what's going for these families, because I said I couldn't read something that will explain to me as a psychologist what is their agony. I looked at what we know about the role of a parent with a child. And in this respect, you can, even if you're not psychoanalytic minded, it is the authority, it is the government that is seen as our parental figure. And when your parental figure is giving you what we call uh, um, I would say, contradicting messages, such as we are doing everything to save them, and at the same time, humiliating the families, telling them that they should shut down, or that 20 more casualties is not will not change our mind or our way of working. You are actually confusing them, and a confused person in traumatic situation, their emotional situation gets worse and worse, because on the one hand, they would like to believe that their parents will take care of them, and the parents are sending a message of support on the one hand, but at the same time, with their action, are doing the opposite. We call it in psychology double bind, which means the child starts not to believe in her own senses. And that's, from our experience, is what lead to definitely emotional difficulties for growing up children, and in some cases, even to the extreme cases of psychosis amongst children. I'm not suggesting this is what is going on for the family, sorry, but I would say this dual communication, these confusing messages, these supporting at the same time sense that no one cares about you, are making the situation even worse for them than if it would be very clear for one side or the other, even though I would have liked it to be to the one that will say, we are going to do everything, which means everything, to free the hostages. The recent videos really made it also hard for everyone. As you can see, I'm always wearing the hostage symbol here. And every Saturday, I'm with them with my wife, and sometimes coming for the Shabbat meeting on Friday, just because I think that, contradicting what I've just said, presence is one of the few things that can help people who feel abandoned. Presence and confirming that I see your suffering and I'm with you. That's it, not more than that.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about this very powerful parent-child analogy? Like, what are the stages of emotions that these families are going through? And why or how does this comparison can help us understand their trauma?
I believe we are not far away from my article, but far away from them. They are in what I would call a learned helplessness. They are, in many cases, hopeless, and mostly because the physiological part is also working. Sleepless nights are very detrimental to our well-being, mental well-being. Stress, the roller coaster of, yes, there is some agreement, no, there is no agreement, yes, there is some, all that have, I think, in a way, is overshadowing what I wrote, because I was writing about the relationship damage that this kind of relationship caused to people. But I'm already seeing the outcome of it, and that's people who are barely living. Some of them, of course, not just like the hostages, but if you look at them, they lost weight or they are overweight because they're trying to maintain something. They are a lot of the time in grief and despair. And what they feel is that they are all the time trying to keep a light of hope, and at the same time mistrust in those who are responsible. I must say that it is something that you all know, and I don't want to, of course, it's not a criticism, it's, I would say, it's the situation that right now they are calling for US authorities, government, ambassadors or whatever, to do the job, which is as if you think about it, is a child that is calling neighbors or next street neighbors to come to help them because their parents are not taking care of them. I mean, just it's a very simple explanation the way I trying to put it in, because I think these relationships between the families and the government, and not less than that, the split. Some of them are kind of the more I should say, like in a family, the more cared and loved child, and some of them are the least appreciated and loved children. And this is also making their life nowadays almost impossible. There are quite few nowadays. It's only 50 families. Some of them know exactly that they will not find their loved ones because they have been killed somewhere and their place of burial is unknown. Some of them are very frightened about those who are alive or may be alive. And I think that none of us can actually get into this emotional position of understanding what it is to lose the ability to know what's happening to your loved one. May I be personal? I lost my son in the jungles of South America. For a month and something, we were looking for him. This month of up and down, of hope and loss of hope, is something that I will never, ever forget in my life. The moment he was found, unfortunately dead, was in a way a relief because they brought him back to Israel and we have a grave. All of these are immense, immense pressure, stress, and agony for these families. And that's why, by the way, I'm volunteering with the helpers, because I feel that the helpers there are absorbing all these emotions that are so difficult to carry. And I don't hide the fact that I myself is a bereaved father, so they can speak openly with me about what's going on for them when they are with these families.
Mooli, thank you for sharing that personal note. Can you tell me from your perspective, what should the Israeli government and authorities be doing differently right now to be able to support the families in very practical terms? Like what kind of approach or messaging from the leadership could help those families that feel abandoned or even sometimes blamed by the
Yes,
situation?
indeed. Yeah, today they were blamed by one of the parliament member of parliament that they should keep quiet because they are doing. I mean, how can you understand what they are going through? I mean, sitting in an air-conditioned space and all that. Anyway, I want to tell you that the Israeli government is doing a lot for them on practical matters. I am involved in that, and that's why I want to reassure you. Practically, they are getting now, after a long, long battle, I should say, or road to these achievements, they are getting financial support. Again, not to the third and fourth layer of support that also stopped working. There is a special unit that will deal with every problem that they are encountering on their daily needs. And that is I would say, a big support for them. And of course, these volunteers that I support. But all of that is basically not the fathers and the mothers, not the government. The government, in my mind, first of all, should be honest. I think that a continuous meeting with these families, sharing with them the difficulties, maybe even be honest and say, what are we really into? Are we going to say, we tried, we failed, we are going to launch a major operation over Gaza, and let's pray that some of the hostages will survive? It's very, very sad, but it's courageous to say something like that. If you're asking me what they should do, I think that you can read it in every other columnist in the Israeli papers and media. There is only one way, unfortunately, that we have learned through this year and 10 months that brings the hostages back. Unfortunately, it is agreement. I must tell you something about terrorism. I've been doing a lot of work on terrorism for years and years. I should even say that many, many years ago, Benjamin Netanyahu was one of my teachers on that issue. And one of the things we knew, and we know now too, that it is completely different to do negotiation with terrorist organization than to do it with the government. We've seen it with Lebanon, we've seen it with Iran even, we've seen it with Syria. When there is a government, even if it's a very, very fragile one like in Syria, you can get to some kind of an agreement. With terrorists, you can only get a deal. It's not an agreement, it's a deal. And that is a completely different thing. And if you don't understand the Middle Eastern philosophy or way of living of what is a deal or otherwise bargain, you're losing it all. And I think this is something the government should also take into account. And there are many, many experts on Arab culture, Arab way of negotiating. I'm not sure we're using that wisdom enough.
Thank you. Mooli, let's talk a little bit about coping and resilience. This is like one of your main topics of teaching and expertise. Beyond, I would say, immediate coping, like how does healing process look for people in this kind of prolonged trauma? I'm talking families whose family members were hostages returned home, and those who got the bodies to have a closure, for example. How are they dealing and how are they healing?
Well, let me just give you a brief overview of what we know about the conditions of those who have been saved. And I will talk about what we know have helped them to keep some kind of normalcy. Altogether, we know that physically, they almost all of them lost weight to a large extent, which is a threat to their general health because this causes all sorts of cardiac problems, breathing problems. Of course, they all suffer from skin diseases because of where they were. And they, of course, have malnutrition and infections of all kinds because of all the insects and unhealthy conditions that they were in. But I should say that altogether, these things, and from my continuous work in the past with Holocaust survivors, this is the part that with a good nutrition and a good program and good medical care, a lot of it can be, I would say, they can recover from, especially the young ones. And this is very important to remember. However, the mental, psychological part is something that after a while, and if you will see them nowadays, most of the those who have been freed look normal. They gain weight, they are behaving as normal people, but inside, and that's something that hardly is shared, most of them are suffering from PTSD. A lot of them are still anxious and anxiety because in their nightmares, they are back in the tunnels and they have very serious sleep disturbances and, of course, deep emotional distress. And, of course, part of it is what we call depression. Now, this is, of course, not covered, and they don't even want, of course, to show it. But I can only tell you that at least one of them shared his testimony last Saturday night. And he said that he seems to go back to normalcy. And that coming back to your question, Marta, as long as the friends, peers, comrades, whatever you call them, who were hostages and are still kept in captivity, are not back, they are like the Holocaust survivors. They vowed not to forget. They vowed to fight for them. They vowed they'll do everything to bring them back. This prolonging of the freeing of the hostages is really making their rehabilitation very, very difficult. I wouldn't say impossible. Again, because of my experience with Holocaust survivors, I can tell you that many of the survivors now who came back have employed many, many methods to keep sanity. Many of them use their imagination. Many of them were connected to higher powers, some of them to God, some of them to something else. Many of them were playing in their mind like a review of life, or they played like a song competition in their own mind. And some of them tried to keep some kind of contact with reality by counting the days, because, and again, they didn't know if it's a night or day, so they made some kind of methods to know that. And between them, they tried to remain as much as possible humans. But again, one of the things that we know from hostages, in this case and others, is what we call the self-blame. The self-blame because one day I ate more, one day I didn't share, one day I took some more water than others. Maybe I should, and maybe I should. All these emotional stress is also part of the road to recovery. And only when they meet each other, or those who have been with their peers, like the girls, like the ladies, who came together as a group, at least most of them, have kind of a shared group where they can share what have happened to them. Because one of the things, again, I learned from my work with Holocaust survivors is that nobody knows the troubles I've seen. They need the ability to be with people who can listen to their stories and help them. Now, the families are walking on, I would say, in Hebrew we say eggshell. I don't know if it's the term in English too. They're trying, on the one hand, to support. They want to hear what have happened, but they are afraid themselves to know exactly what have happened. They want to actually bring the sky down for these people, but this is contradicting to the fact that these men and women are feeling that they are survivors and they are strong. They don't want to be suddenly very dependent. And at the same time, they need to be dependent. So it is not a task for individuals. It's a task for the family. And if you're asking me, for the immediate family, but also to the community around them. And that's why it's so important in Israel and everywhere else to have what we call trauma-informed communities. That people understand that the fact that I go out and I look as if I'm intact, that doesn't mean I'm not very sensitive. It doesn't mean that I had a moment of night sleep.
Uh, Thank you, Mooli. I would like to remind our audience that you can write your questions here in the chat. And in the meantime, we'll continue. Mooli, I would like to move a little bit to the diaspora and the community outside of Israel.
Indeed.
Many people in Europe and in the US, Jewish diaspora, but also, friends of Israel, we all feel heartbroken and helpless when we watch this tragedy from afar. Uh, are there any, in your opinion, ways that are meaningful that the Jewish diaspora and the supporters can take to support the hostage families in Israeli society during this crisis?
actually said to you that the simplest thing is what we call presence. Presence can be in writing emails, in doing everything when these people are coming to meet uh, whoever, politicians, faith leaders, whatever, to support them, to give them a sense that they are not alone, that wherever they come, there is a warm heart and people that are waiting for them and supporting them. And again, I think that practical things like they need funds or whatever, I don't know about it, so I can't really advocate for this or the other. But I think that if you're coming to Israel and you're going to be in the hostage square, try to be there when it's not full of people, because then, of course, it is thousands and thousands, and your presence will be okay, but not meaningful. Try to be in the hours that are less crowded and sit with these people, even if you don't really understand Hebrew. They speak quite good English nowadays because they know they have to speak around the world, and give them a chance to retell the stories. Don't interrupt. Don't be over emotional because they are already have, I believe, exhausted their ability to be emotional on things that they don't actually need in order to continue with their fight for their loved ones. But be there, look at them in their eyes, listen to them, and tell them you are there and you will do everything you can as human beings to support them and to be with them. That's a very simple thing. But I know that it is becoming very difficult for you Jewish people in this diaspora because you have the what we call the repercussions of what's going on here. And I don't close my eyes for a moment for this threat. I believe that it is, of course, a monster that was waiting to raise its head. But unfortunately, once this shadow came out of the of behind the screens or whatever, or wherever it was hiding, it is quite difficult to bring that back into its manageable size. I'm talking about anti-Semitism and the confusion between anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish and anti-Semitism. So, of course, when you are fighting for the hostages, don't forget to take good care of yourself and don't at any time endanger your own safety, because this will not help anyone. That someone on the way to support these families or this idea or the fighting, that there will be a world understanding and appreciation of the horrible atrocities of the Hamas, that some of you will be hurt. I know that it is even more so for young people, that they are sometimes becoming very zealous and very strong. Beware. I mean, the crowd around is less and less sympathizing with Israel and might hurt you too. So that's what I would like to say on this page. But once you're writing them, just share your own words of how it is for you to feel for them and that you support them. And you, of course, pray or pressurize your own congressmen to do everything they can to free the hostages. Of course, I don't think this will make a difference, but for them, knowing they are not alone is the most important thing, because the other things are beyond their abilities.
Thank you, Mooli. I would like to ask about something, kind of stay in the same topic, because you mentioned emotional toll that the diaspora is experiencing because of what's going on in Israel, and how the Jewish diaspora is being blamed by whatever Israeli government is doing, and the situation in Gaza. And this all comes with a horribly rising anti-Semitism in US and Europe. how the diaspora, how we, the Friends of Israel and the supporters, how can we deal with that? Being so far away and sometimes not really having any even direct contact with Israel.
Hmm. Well, I would like to be practical, if I may say, of how, from my perspective, a community can take care of itself in such times, because the threat is on the community and of people around you. So the first thing I think is not to play a blind eye, not to ignore the threat, because unfortunately that will only lead to moment of surprise or despair if we are not doing anything. But again, I'm not talking about buying guns. In the States anyway, I don't need to give this advice. I'm talking about strengthening internal social cohesion. Um, Even more than ever, doing a lot on mutual support group, like making it possible either on Zoom if you're too far away, or in any place where you congregate people, circles of listening, and sharing with each other, but not only immerse yourself in the fear, but also understand there are possibilities. But once we are feeling again the togetherness, it's part of the thing. Then I think that even more than ever, doing a lot on cultural preservations, on even for like כאשר יענוהו כן יכבה וכן יפרוץ, like in Egypt, the opposite of what they would like. That means practice traditional services and rituals and things as much as you can. Even if you don't do it outside, do it for people to feel that they are together, because being alone is the worst, and being helpless is these two things. Aloneness and helplessness is the road to despair. Now, the other thing is, of course, try as much as possible as leaders, and I know that some of them are taking a leadership role, to be as much as possible what we call horizontal leadership, inclusive planning, thinking about what can enhance our resilience. One thing that I am now trying to develop here in Israel for the communities who are trying to recover is what I call elder-youth dialogue. Because, you know, there are so many people in your community that has been through troubles, and they have a lot of experience, and most of it is about getting through difficult times. I actually sometimes say to people here, I'll translate it to English, when the world outside feels unsafe, the inner circle must feel like home. I also think that from my perspective of my profession, is again to do a lot of training within your community to what we call community-based mental health support. That is something that Marta and I was doing for the Ukrainian and the Polish people who were working with Ukrainians, because we believe that following that and following on that training, counselor, creating safe places to talk, talking about resilience, all that is so important. And of course, hope-based narratives. It's important for us not to lose hope. That is to emphasize agency, to talk about our future vision and our ability in past times to recover from anything. And that's belief in the Jewish history, which is I would say, an example of the ability of resurrection. Not to the least is, of course, to try at least, and I know from my several sessions with Canadian Jewry that it's quite difficult, but I wouldn't give up on that, to build alliance with other communities and with local services that are not against, or at least I would say, I hope that they are supportive, but at least not against. I know that in the States you have a documentation of violation and violence, which is also something that you do for prosecution and things. That's something I shouldn't even tact because I talk about it because it's not my area. But I think that I would like to create possibilities, and Martha said that I'm from the expressive art therapies. I would like to help or to think how to create spaces for expression, which I call like drama, theater, even digital storytelling, or exhibitions within your community centers that are putting out the message we are going to go through it. We are strong and we are hopeful. Of course, we did it for the European communities in many places, creating for them what we call a Jewish Council for Emergency. We did with them alert systems. We thought about emergency response teams and plans. And of course, I should say that we need to map those areas where we might be more vulnerable, like old age homes and education system. But again, at the same time, I would do a lot of youth empowerment to encourage their leadership and encourage their participation. I know that it is something that is very personal, but I would say that cultivating meaning by faith and spiritual strength is also very, very important. And of course, in this case, we are connecting to a power beyond our own self. For some people, it is a very important way to cope in crisis. Now, I believe that a open communication, I'm going to say something that might be difficult for you to hear. An open communication and expressing your concern and your ideas of what is the price that both Jews, Israel, is paying for this prolonged war, and actually expressing your point of view of what should be done is part of what I call partnership. Partnership is not of saying yes, but actually saying we don't agree or we are with you, but we want you to listen to what is important for us, etc., etc. I don't believe in a one-way dialogue.
Thank you. Mooli, we have a question from Jonathan. Can you tell us a little bit is there a conversation in the Israeli society about the fact that already most soldiers have been lost than there are hostages or were hostages? And is there a discussion about the future losses still to come if the war drags on without a clear end?
I would say that in the past 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more, there is a change in this Israeli society. Basically, I would say the media, even the formal media like the news and the papers and the radio, are more open to talk about the toll we are paying and the cost of the war on this issue that you are saying. The fact that there are more soldiers who were killed, I'm going to say something difficult, but you see, it is part of the contract between a state and its soldiers that they are going to protect the state and may have to lose their life on that. That, I believe, is very, very important to acknowledge. At the same time, I would say that in the first year and a half or year and few months, you wouldn't find many Israelis who would object to the continuous war in Gaza. But now I believe that what happens is that the memory of the 18 years of war in Lebanon, which some of us have forgotten, but was after a victory, became like a mud puddle that we sank into it, and every other day and every other week we had soldiers killed and wounded. This toll are now becoming an open discussion. And of course, there is a disagreement between some groups in Israel and some other groups. But I believe that the fact that it is now open on the table is making it possible for, at least for parents, and I've heard in the past few weeks, parents of soldiers, both men and women, and both soldiers men and soldiers women, that are actually asking, why are we going into this trap of terrorism? And we know that terror is not going to disappear. I was involved in many advisory committee for the Israeli National Security Council in the past, especially during Sharon's time. And we managed to do something that no other countries managed to do in the West Bank. But listen, 20 years later, there is a lot of terrorism there too. So we have to understand that terrorism is an issue that sometimes for armies very difficult to deal with. So altogether, it is a big question. I would not even question, a dilemma, because we know that with terrorism we'll have to keep on fighting, but we need, for our mental and physical well-being, to have a respite, to have a period of time where families, soldiers, everyone just need to take a gap to breathe. The fact that some of the soldiers, and here I am again talking about myself, my son have done over 500 days of miluim. He is the CEO of two very successful companies. Can you imagine that he is managing them and fighting and managing them and fighting? It's very difficult. And I'm talking about his family, and he is okay, he's a commander, everything. This is becoming impossible without a respite, without what we call ceasefire, a real ceasefire. We need the ceasefire inside people, inside nation, inside for people to have some time to recover. May I just point one last thing about it? You see, many people are saying that we have been through Holocaust. And I say, no, this is a pogrom, not a Holocaust. We should never compare a planned this destruction and destruction, yes, of nations and people like the Holocaust to what have happened in the South. At the same time, we need to remember that the Holocaust survivors who came to Israel and to the United States or anywhere else in the world have left the I would say have left Shadowland. I try to be a little bit more pictorial. For those whose homes were burned, their loved ones were murdered, that they have seen the massacre in their own eyes, that they have been for hours and hours in the sealed room, it is not that they are going to some other place with hope to build a new life. It's going back to Shadowland. We expect them to be able to live in the same kibbutzim, moshavim, and it is a complete, and telling them that even the Holocaust survivors managed it. No, we are confusing here. Holocaust survivors left Shadowland. They are living back in Shadowland, and the process of recovery in such situations is very difficult, sensitive, and prolonged. That's why this road to recovery will be very long. And again, on a voluntary basis, I'm trying my little so my little piece of support on this very unfortunate situation.
Thank you, Mooli. I know Tom has a little comment and remark. Tom had a chance to meet with you in Warsaw.
And also,
So, Tom, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Dr. Lahad, I want to say to you, the work what you are doing is remarkable. I don't know how to accomplish dealing with the psychological trauma in a better way than what you're doing. I know your resources are limited, but I did have a glimpse seeing my wife and I were in Poland, and Marta, we went to go see what you're doing with Ukrainians and teaching them how to deal with this trauma. This time is very different, I think, with Israelis because it's going on for so long. And the soldiers are so exhausted. The families are so exhausted. And their normal life with working and serving in the military and this, even the photos and the reports that are coming out is just, where is there support in the world for what the Israelis are doing? It just seems that there is plenty of support. Don't misunderstand me. And we know that, and Marta knows that, and knows that even in the central of and Eastern Europe, the calls on the smaller countries in that region are calling you all the time. They want more and more involvement with what you're doing, and you're responding with the resources that you have as best as you can. And so I'm saying to you that this is a long road ahead of us just to deal with this trauma. After this war, God willing, is done soon, but it's going to be, the residual effects will be for a long time. And so we just cannot underestimate, and I cannot thank you enough for what you're doing, the leadership that you're showing. And Marta, also what you're doing recruiting in Central and Eastern Europe is just really important. So look, Mark said earlier about how to help ELNET with its mission to do what it's doing. And we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have, and we want to always do more and do better. And to do that, we need, quite frankly, we need money, and we need your contributions, all the listeners there. You're responding, and it's beautiful how you respond. And we thank you so much. And so if you can respond more and more often, you can just see in the Dr. Lahad what you're doing. You just need to be able to get there. I don't even remember your staff. It's amazingly small for the number of people that you're reaching. And you're dealing with demands today, but in reality, the demands tomorrow, the day after, is going to be magnificently large. It's huge. So thank you for what you do. It's making such a big difference. It's comforting so many people in dealing with life after suffering so much trauma. So that's just my point. I just wanted to say thank you so very much.
Thank
you,
you.
Tom. Mooli, before we close, I have one more question, and you can be very brief. I'm kind of wondering, how do you see it? What are your thoughts on this complete insensitivity to the Israeli trauma in the psychological, I would say, world in Europe? Why the stories of, Israeli victims of October 7, of gender-based violence that happened there, of the hostages, are not cutting through the mainstream narrative, like the pictures of the children in Gaza are? What's your assessment?
I already talked about desensitization and getting used to. Time nowadays is a concept that people are not even understanding how quickly things and interests are changing. I'm not talking just about the AI, I'm talking about humans and the bombardment of information. I think that the stories of the people who were murdered, abused in this way or the other, is nowadays seen as the excuse for the Israel to continue the war, not as what we would say the reason for the need for Israel to go on this war and make sure this will not happen again. I remember that when we met just at the beginning of the war, I told you one of the major beliefs of the Israelis as a statement by people and state was never again. What happened on October 7th have actually, in many ways, had, I would say, dramatic effect on that very important basic belief. However, and I think that the reaction was understood at that time, and the atrocities and the images of that, even it was in many places denied, was a story that people could identify with. Unfortunately, part of it is, of course, propaganda, but you know that in every propaganda there is a seed of truth. There is no hunger in Gaza that is, I would say, organized or concentrated by Israel. But this is not the case for people to look for truth. This is an image that is catching their eyes, and most so the fact that so many children were killed. Again, I'm not going into the judicial part of it. Was it this or that or other? We know from years of research on the impact of death on people that whenever it is a child, the reaction is far more than when it's an older person. I was working with firefighters both in Israel and in the US. They will always tell you, when I go into disaster area, and there are only adults, it's hard, but it's not impossible. When I go to disaster area and the killing is of children, or the dismembering bodies are of children, it takes them days and weeks to recover. And when they come home, they walk around the house looking again and again on their own children. So it is, I would say, the case of how long can you keep a dramatic story alive. There is a miracle, I should say, that the Holocaust, mostly by the fight for legislation in many countries, is kept alive after so many years. But it wasn't so easy to make the Holocaust Day an international day. It took a long, long, long journey. Nowadays, it will probably be much more difficult because of all the politics that are involved. And we shouldn't hide that there are extreme groups in Israel who are actually in many of the deeds, and mostly of what they say, is hampering any ability to build some kind of story that in this way or another will represent the grief, the bereavement, the toll on people here.
Thank you, Mooli. Is there any message of hope that we can close this conversation with?
Despite my almost more than 50 years in the business of trauma, and may I say so, taking Elie Wiesel's term, there is no business like Holocaust, Shoah business, as he said. It is a business. It's not a business. For me, it's a mission in life. As you know, I don't work privately. So for me, it's a mission. Anyway, but I think that within this hard times, I even would say sometimes dark times, there are so many glimpses of courage of hope, of people doing their best to help others. I would like to strengthen again and again, stress again and again and again, the Israeli community, the Israeli people are amazing. These 70 people that I met this morning, 70 people at the age of 65 plus, leaving their homes for a full year to live with the settlements around Gaza and in the northern front. This is amazing. These are what I call glimpses of light or rays of light in darkness. And there are so many of these kind of things. When someone is in need, you will see how quickly people donate money to help them. And it's all by the normal people who pays 10 shekels, 100 shekels. All of these, I would say, are signs that the spirit of the Israelis is still on the right place. And I hope that this glimpse of lights, or as I sometimes say, these little lights, when they will come together, they will also lighten up us and maybe others. Because you see, I always say to my clients, to myself, to my family, even the longest and darkest night ends at sunrise. We shouldn't stop believing. We have the feeling that our short time of staying on this planet is the history. No. The Jewish people have over 2,000 years of history with traumas, with atrocities, with Holocaust, with pogroms. Never, ever take despair as your program or your plan. Despair is not a plan. By the way, hope is very much a plan.
Thank you, Mooli. Thank you really so much for all your work, all the hope that you give us in this really dark period. And I really hope that this was a very enlightening conversation and that our audience learned a lot and at least some of the questions that they had were answered. So Mooli, thank you once again for, being a friend, for being a friend of ELNET, and it's always a pleasure working with you. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to let you know that next week on Monday we're going to have an amazing expert who is in a different field, in a field of intelligence, Michael Pregent. So please join us again the same time next week. And Mooli, once again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. And as you know, I will always be happy to support ELNET.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.